if stereotyping was, get this, helpful in leadership? I know that sounds crazy, but just go with me for a minute here. What would happen if you let yourself lean into that initial bias just enough so that you could see it and accept it? You could accept your first gut reaction for what it was, a biased gut reaction, and then use that to make better decisions, to build stronger relationships, and to get more clarity in problem solving. Well, today, I am going to show you how to leverage your stereotypes and build stronger connections to get better solutions. Now, wait, I know you're thinking stereotypes are bad, aren't they? Now, don't get me wrong, I am not advocating that we would hire, promote, or build processes and systems based on biased assumptions. Not in the least bit. Stereotyping, it isn't useful, it isn't helpful, and there are a lot of situations where you can get in quite a bit of hot water for it. But that being said, avoiding stereotypes like the plague and denying that we have them at all might actually do even more harm. So let's take an example. Let's say we have a woman who's approaching retirement age. We will call her Betty for the sake of this example. Now, Betty can't log into the system on her laptop. She has worked at this for about 2 hours that day, right? And she needs the system to be able to go into the meeting. Now, because she can't get in, she shows up to the conference room. She shows up to her meeting with a yellow legal pad and a pen. Your biased assumption would probably be that Betty hates technology and doesn't understand it, or maybe that she's resisting the change to the new system. You are going to immediately realize that you have stereotyped based on her age, right? That would be the thing that most of us do. As soon as we'd have that thought, that, I bet Betty's just avoiding the system altogether. Or, man, these boomers, they just cannot get it together with new tech. But once you felt that thought in your head, you would probably get embarrassed by it. You'd probably clam up and pretend that you didn't notice Betty was just writing all of her notes, right? Everybody else is on their laptops, and you would just be blind to the fact that Betty couldn't figure out how to get into the system. Honestly, you wouldn't even know that simple fact because you wouldn't have even asked. Now, your effort to avoid stereotyping Betty as a boomer who hates technology would mean that Betty doesn't get the support she needs to fix her issue. Because again, you never asked. She might be embarrassed herself because she doesn't want people to think of her that way. She doesn't want everyone to stop what they're doing to give her an extra hand. And so she's just going to do the double work that it would take to write the notes, take another few hours to figure it out, maybe call IT, and then put all of the notes into the system when she's back. The rest of that team is either going to make that same assumption about Betty that these boomers just can't get it together, they just don't know technology, or they're going to assume that you, as the leader, don't follow through on your expectations for people. If you said we should be in the system and you don't have Betty be in the system, maybe that's on you. Worse yet, all of those things could happen at once, right? Betty could be without the system. Betty could be embarrassed and feel like it's her against the rest of the team. She will likely have double work for what she needs to do, and your team could make the same assumption. It could be validated by the fact that you're keeping quiet about it, and they might think less of you as a leader overall. So, avoiding stereotyping Betty actually caused a snowball effect of problems. You can use stereotypes to your advantage because stereotypes can actually prompt curiosity. And that curiosity is just the first step in building stronger relationships with your team. And then you can leverage those relationships to motivate them to hit bigger goals. But first, you need to stop using stereotypes to clam up and use them as an excuse to open up instead. Now, before we jump into exactly how you do that, I want you to think a little bit about why it happens. We know that it comes from a fear. We know that we say, oh, well, I don't want to stereotype. And then we stop and we pull back, we retreat from saying anything. But why is that? Why do we have that feeling? Now, you can say that it's part of how you were raised. You can say that you learn it as part of society, but really, it is ingrained in us as human nature. We are built, we are wired to recognize the in group and the out group, right? It is us and it is them. More accurately, it is us, and then there is everybody else who is not us. And so if we feel like we are part of the group who is doing it right, who is thinking the right way, who's behaving the right way, who is getting the right opportunities, we want to stay in that group at all costs. And so when you have a simple example of Betty can't log into the system, just opening it up and pointing out that she might be part of this other group, part of the group that doesn't get it, part of the group that doesn't think the right way, then we are telling her that she's not like us. And we know that it is ingrained in us to want to be part of this group. So we don't want to be the reason that she's pushed out. We don't want to be the reason that she is othered in some way. And so we just stop and we pretend that we never saw it in the first place. It didn't exist. It never occurred to us because we feel like that is how we can keep ourselves and Betty, in this example, safe. When the truth is that opening it up to understand what is behind where Betty is at or anybody else who you are having those snap judgments about, when you open up the opportunity to really understand where they're coming from, you broaden that us circle. You allow them to realize that they are deeply ingrained in us. We want you to be part of this group. And you actually make it wider. You make that circle wider so that even more people can be part of it. So, it is critically important that you use your stereotypes, that you use those first snap judgments in your head to prompt you to get curious so that you can open that circle a bit wider for people so that we can get the best results out of our team and make sure that they are feeling like they are part of the group that can make things happen. So, how do we do that? How do we make the stereotype be a trigger for curiosity? Well, I want you to think about it like this. What if you flipped it? What if it wasn't a trigger to retreat, but rather a trigger to lean in? So that when you realized you were stereotyping, you used it as a prompt to get closer to the information instead of pull away from it. Because the truth is, your first thought is automatic. It is. It's that next thought that you get to choose. The first thought might be a stereotype, it might be a snap judgment based on your biases, but you get to pick what the next thought is. So, why not pick a thought that is helpful? Why not pick a thought that helps you lean into what's going on? I would challenge you to ask yourself this as your second thought every time. Why would that be? So when you see Betty walk into this meeting with her legal pad and you assume that she is just avoiding the system, she's avoiding the change that you are trying to roll out. That assumption, that is your first thought, right? That is your trigger that's going to tell you to ask another question now. It's not going to tell you that you're bad. It's not going to tell you that you should back off. It's going to tell you that you should lean in and say, why would that be? What is going on that that would be true? Let me give you another example. Years ago, when millennials were the new kids on the blocks, the ones that didn't want to work anymore, I was sitting in a meeting with two men who likely had children who were more the millennial age than they themselves were. They were working in insurance and they were talking about the shortage of outside adjusters. Outside adjusters are the gentlemen and ladies, of course, that go up on roofs after hail damage or that go into, storm impacted cities to understand the level of damage so that the insurance companies can process claims that come in. So, as they were having these conversations, they were all in on their stereotypes of millennials. One said, "No one wants to work anymore." The other one responded with, "I know, these kids today aren't willing to walk into a flooded basement. They just want a cushy office job." And they said it with such disdain, such frustration. It went on like that for a while. And at first, I was agreeing with them. After all, they had a ton of experience and they just felt so sure of everything that they were saying. Not to mention, part of what they were saying was right. There was a shortage on outside adjusters. So, all of that put together almost got me to leap over the edge and just agree. The stereotype must be true. Millennials don't want to work. We don't have enough people doing this work. And clearly, it's because they don't want to do this type of work anymore. They're so entitled to those cushy office jobs. And then I asked myself, why would that be? Why would people not want that job that seemed like a decent one for folks to have? So I asked the two men sitting in front of me, the two men who had cushy office jobs, the two men who were having this conversation in their swivel chairs, complaining about the fact that no one wanted to do real work anymore. Why didn't they want that work? Why didn't their kids, the ones who would be in that generation, want that work? Rather than assuming that the stereotype was true or avoiding it because it was so uncomfortable and wrong to think a negative thing about a whole generation, I just got curious about what those answers could be. And the answer was pretty simple. The job just wasn't attractive anymore. The pay wasn't competitive. The hours were brutal. There was tons of last minute travel. And the physical risks were pretty high. I mean, think about it. We were asking people to go on roofs, go into basements, be around these buildings that are crumbling around them sometimes due to some natural disaster. It wasn't that kids today didn't want to work, it was that the system hadn't kept up with the market or the workforce. What started as a stereotype of millennials are lazy actually opened the door to a bigger conversation about the barriers to recruiting and retaining the right talent. So we got to have a bigger conversation about how we could actually solve this problem rather than talking about what was wrong with people, because that's a problem that A, you're probably not going to get right, and B, even if you're right, you're not going to solve. And that's the power of letting stereotypes be a trigger for curiosity instead of a dead end. So let's come back to Betty for a second, right? What if instead of shrinking away from your bias, you leaned into it with that curiosity? Instead of assuming that she was avoiding technology or pretending not to notice that she had that legal pad there, what if you asked her, "Hey, Betty, I noticed you didn't have your laptop at the meeting today. What's going on? Do you need a hand?" That question could have uncovered a number of issues. Maybe the system locked her out again and she had too many attempts, so she really just couldn't get in at that moment. Maybe she didn't get training for how to get into there, or maybe the training wasn't built in a way to actually meet her needs. Did IT actually give her the access correctly? Suddenly, the stereotype about her age and the tech resistance isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning to uncovering an actually solvable problem. And here is the bigger point. Curiosity that grows out of stereotypes lets you work on two levels at once. On the individual level, you get to support the Bettys of the world so that they don't feel left behind, embarrassed, or overworked. And on the systemic level, you start noticing the patterns, like we did with that lack of outside adjusters. If one employee is struggling, maybe it's a training issue. If multiple employees are struggling, maybe there's a gap in the design or in the support or in the structure on its own. Either way, curiosity helps you see beyond the stereotypes to both the person and the system. And that is the sweet spot of where the best solutions live. So the next time you catch yourself stereotyping, don't push it down, don't ignore it. Use it as a signal. Pause, get curious. Ask yourself, why would that be? And when you do, you'll not only deepen your relationships with your team, but you'll uncover the opportunities to make your organization stronger. All right, I hope that that was helpful. And if you know someone who struggles to get curious with their team, struggles to see the benefit of taking the time to do that, or someone who really struggles with stereotyping and wants a leg up on what to do about that, please share this video with them. And if you have any questions, any concerns, by all means, please leave me a comment.